My name is Suzanne Beagle, and I'm the co-founder of Gender Smart, based in London, and the founder of Catalyst at Large. And I'm delighted to be here to talk about how we ensure that our investments benefit women. And I'm here with Tamara Abdel-Jaber and Claudia Jaramillo, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them. Tamara is a partner at Imam Ventures, a gender lens investment fund that caters to businesses that are committed to equality, those that put women at the front and focus specifically on serving women in Jordan and in the MENA region. She's also the founder and chief exec at Palma Consulting, and she's an expert at strategy design and execution, digital transformation. And we're just really lucky to have you here, Tamara. Thank you. And Claudia is the corporate officer and vice president treasurer of Schlumberger. She's based in Houston, and during more than her 20 years in the energy industry, she's held a variety of leadership and senior finance position in the Americas, in Europe, and Asia. And prior to working in the energy industry, I understand she has a deep background in telecom, and she's passionate about technology, how we leverage technology in business at the world at large. So I'm delighted to have you both here. I thought I would start with some context for our discussion about gender lens investing. So just a few definitions. Gender lens investing is investing for both a financial return and a positive gender equality impact, as well as an overall approach to mitigating risk and seizing opportunities to solve real business, social, and environmental challenges by paying attention to gender and diversity. It spans who is at the table in ownership and leadership of funds and firms, in looking at leadership and governance, management, employment and supply chains, and customers in the companies we invest in. And it's as much about deploying the capital as it is about the target and the destination of that capital and its impact on women and on society. This transcends public markets and private. It transcends public capital and private capital, developed and emerging economies, and takes on many flavors, from access to capital for women entrepreneurs, to co-founders, to looking across the value chain of a business and thinking about employment, looking at quality employment, not just counting jobs, thinking about supply chains, as I mentioned, and then the products and services and customers of those businesses. And it's increasingly being clear that we need to look at the traditional power structures in investment in order to really, truly tap into the talent and innovation that's there when we create inclusive and diverse teams and offerings. And there's a recognition that there's a business case for this, as well as a development and impact case to be made. And I think you're going to hear from our two speakers very much about that. And from the point of view of how do we really ensure that our investments are benefiting women, I think we might focus more on women as entrepreneurs, as employees, in supply chains and value chains, and as customers. So there's so much to talk about in gender lens investing, but that's really where we'll focus. And my work for the last 20 years at Catalyst at Large and the last 4 at Gender Smart has really been to unlock unprecedented capital with more strategic intent, more impact, and more velocity towards women to really get to those outcomes. And I really do that primarily with larger institutional asset owners, but I also work with fund managers like Tamara in really helping people get gender smart. We are lucky in 2022 that we have access to research from McKinsey and other consulting firms, to Harvard and Wharton, where I do a project called Project Sage, which looks at venture capital, private equity, private debt with a gender lens, to UBS and Morgan Stanley, and to the UN agencies, the OECD and others. There's so much data out there. And I would point you to the gendersmartinvesting.com website for more information. In the public market side, publicly traded funds that might invest in a Schlumberger, for example, and all of their equivalents, looking at public equities, has gotten to $11 billion of capital, which is small in the context of the whole capital markets. But compared to when I started 20 years ago, it is significant, and it's been a significant rise in the last 3 years. On the private market side, funds like the one that Tamara leads, funds with an explicit gender lens, have raised a collective $6 billion in capital and are seeking over 13 billion. And so just within the slice of funds that are intentional about that, there are hundreds. My latest research showed 206 funds that have an intentional gender lens, and many of them have a lenses around diversity more broadly, in addition to gender. So tremendous growth. There's a group called the 2X Challenge, which is made up of the development finance institutions and multilateral development banks. And they have moved $11 billion of capital through the end of between 2018 and 2020. And they're on target to be reaching more than $15 billion in capital. So there are people who are really committing explicitly a gender agenda in their investments, as well as a climate and gender agenda, which many of those development institutions are looking to achieve. And from a blended finance standpoint, there are a number of funds that have come through that are really prioritizing on impact on women, especially women who are more marginalized settings, that as well as women that are just really aiming for new, unproven, less proven solutions, which need a combination of philanthropic capital as well as really commercial investment capital. And that's blended finance coming together with multiple forms of capital to really address an issue. So when you're building a new arena that is underinvested, like energy access in emerging markets, for women where women are the customers and the productive use customers and women are employees, that's an area that's been underinvested in by commercial markets. So there's a boost that's coming from actors like Rockefeller, IKEA Foundation, and the Bezos Energy Fund, which just got announced a $10 billion commitment just to look at climate and energy specifically for the 2.4 billion that don't have access to reliable energy. And I know we're going to talk more about energy later, Claudia. So there are so many statistics about when you have women in the picture at the decision-making level, you get to better gender outcomes. You wind up with women as fund managers investing more in women entrepreneurs, but also in the climate context. That Bloomberg New Energy Finance did a piece of research with Sasakawa Peace Foundation that said when you have more women at the board and in the C-suite, you get better gender outcomes, better climate outcomes, and better innovation outcomes and business outcomes. So this research that's out there is really helping us to understand what those opportunities look like. So now I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to dive in with Tamara and Claudia. And thank you for making this time with us. And so feel free when you start to also give a little bit of your context, because I think that's helpful. So the first is, how does your company align investment decisions with SDG 5? And let's start with Tamara.
Thank you, Susan. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to talk about Amam Ventures and the work that we do in this part of the world. Amam Ventures is the Levant's only gender lens investment fund. So we're all about targeting women, but not excluding men. We want to bring both to the table in order for women to get better opportunities. This part of the world is the most gender unequal region. So there's a big gap and there's a lot that needs to be done to address that gap. And of course, SDG 5 is a guiding principle, as well as the WEPs, the 2X challenge criteria. So we've used those as guiding principles when designing Amam Ventures and launching it in January last year. We use things like the 2X challenge criteria, for instance, as a screening criteria for the companies we look at, both post-investment and pre-investment. We look at SDG 5 and how companies measure up against it, and see what we can do to help the companies perform better when it comes to their to the SDGs in general, but mostly SDG 5. And of course, that's a guiding principle for us as well at Amam.
And I'll come back later and ask you how you measure that impact. But Claudia, over to you.
Yeah, so I work for Schlumberger, and Schlumberger is an energy services company. So we invest a lot in technology, and I'll talk a lot about the impact of technology in this. The way we think about SDG 5, and we always refer to gender equality, and in a lens that is across the workplace, the supply chain, and in the communities where we operate. And we'll talk a little bit more about climate in particular, because it has a huge impact on SDG 5 and the gender equality. So when we think about the workplace and the diversity and inclusion, it's been such a central pillar of our identity. And we think our company, when we, Tamara was talking about, how, gender equality in her region, we operate in some of those regions. We're a big pillar. We invest in those regions a lot in the infrastructure and all that. The gender lens is very important. I go back to when we started including recruiting women in our field operations. So in energy, these are very challenging operations. So we started back in the 1970s to recruit women in field operations. And in 1994, we set our first company-wide diversity, gender diversity ambition. So that's very important. Then we go to the supply chain, and we have a supplier diversity program that aligns not only with SDG 5, we also talk about the SDG 8 and 10, so decent work, economic growth. Again, very important, the gender equality, the economic growth, how women play a huge role in economic growth and the multiplying effect that women play, and reduce inequality. And then empowering and upskilling women, we have the foundation where we encourage women to be in STEM. And we have a program in the foundation scholarship, we call it Faculty for the Future, where we award fellowships to women from emerging economies to pursue advanced graduate studies in STEM in leading research institutes abroad. Now, many things that we do with the gender lens, and I'll talk about my personal experience in the pension. So as a treasurer of Schlumberger, I oversee the investment of the pension, and we have large pension programs in the company. So we have roughly $30 billion that we invest in the pensions. And I personally pay a lot of attention to women represented in that. So I'll give you an example. If I meet with companies that manage some of our funds, so we have funds that are have, for example, global impact. I will ask a question if they present, for example, a slate or a slide where they have all these portfolio managers, and I see this with only men on the slide. I will ask a question: where are women in this decision-making team? So I do ask those questions. Sometimes I'll ask it. I say it's partly because we want to make sure we don't have bias in the decisions. It's about having diversity of thought in the decision making. So as you said it, Suzanne, very well, is the very positive impact of having this diversity of thought, and women play a huge role in that. So this is just illustrating how we translate that into decision making and some of the investments.
Thank you. The power of having somebody in the treasurer's office who is really focused on this is fantastic. Yeah. So the percentage of women decision makers in venture capital firms and investment management is quite low, as we know. It's an average of 14% in the US. It's 13% in the UK. It's much less in the Middle East. And why do you think it's important to have women included in the investment decision-making process? And you've both spoken a little bit about that, but Tamara, do you want to elaborate?
Of course. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The percentage is extremely low in this part of the world. Unfortunately, there is no data to tell us how low. But we know that when my partners and I came together to start Amam Ventures, we realized that we were one of very few investment management teams that are all female in this part of the world. And we immediately saw the difference. So I've had my own business for 20 years, so did my other partner. But when we started talking to potential investors as an all-female team, we immediately could see that the questions we were asked were different. The amount of preparation we were expected to do was very different. The structure of our data rooms was different. It was really challenging, but for us, it meant that we have a bigger point to prove and bigger change to make happen. So it made us believe more in why we started all this. And just to give some background, when the way we started Amam Ventures, we had started a virtual community back in 2017 with the aim of mentoring business owners, women business owners across the region. That virtual community, Women in Business Arabia, grew organically, and now we have more than 45,000 women from across the region. 20% of those are business owners. When we started talking to the women and looking at those business owners, some of them have amazing businesses, but still their growth has always been limited because they didn't have access to funding, and especially the right type of funding. Bank financing is not the right thing for them. A lot of them, because of societal norms and customs in this part of the world, don't have access to capital that they can put in or assets that they can put in as collateral. And a lot of those businesses are non-tech, so they have no access to VCs, and they're not investment ready. A lot of them have never talked to investors before or presented a pitch deck. So we felt that this is a journey that all three of us are extremely passionate about, that this is something that we wanted to change. And so we decided that this is the right time to start a gender lens investment fund that focuses on Jordan and Egypt for now, but we know that this is something that's badly needed across the region and of course across the globe, because the gap is extremely big everywhere.
And I think you mentioned earlier, and Claudia mentioned, when you have more women at the investment table, your interaction with those entrepreneurs is really different. And you're able to attract more women entrepreneurs who want to talk to you as an investor of choice, in addition to the other pieces.
And what's been really interesting is that we have a lot of men in our network who are now helping us find those amazing women and recommending women, especially outside in rural areas where we have limited access, which I found was fascinating, because now we have more men on board who believe in our mission.
Yeah. And my research and with Project Sage, but also the other research that plays out, is when you have the diversity, as you mentioned, both of you, and men and women at the table, you then have the ability to have women entrepreneurs feeling more comfortable speaking to women fund managers, but you have more ability to have men deploying capital in a different way because they're influenced by how that really feels. Claudia, over to you.
Yeah, I really like, what Tamara is saying of having more allies, because I think is that, reaching that point where we pivot. What is real is we have so much research showing that, having better diversity in boards and having better diversity at executive levels leads to better financial performance. So the business case has been made, and it's been for, a few years now that we have the stats. But it's a human thing that we have bias, and there's something called affinity bias, and that is a major barrier to female founders. And it has been shown that female founders raising venture capital, the persistent lack of female decision makers at venture capital firms, that is a major barrier to them. And that has been proven in a different way. Female or women venture capitalists invest up to 2 times more in female founders. So when a woman is the one writing the check, they invest up to 2 times in female founders and up to 3 times when it's a female CEO. So, it starts changing the dynamic, and then you start having allies, which is a very interesting thing. So I think that's important. That's an important thing to say. And why is that? It's just a normal thing. What I mean normal in the sense that it's very human, that investors tend to gravitate towards, people who think or even look like they do. The same way, we may recruit people that think or look like us. We go out with people that look like us and all that. That has been researched in so many different disciplines. And in VC and venture capital, what happens is that the contrast is huge. They start even at analyst level. They start in, let's call it mid 30% in analysts, and it starts dropping at partner level, and at managing director level is now sometimes single digits. So we definitely need women in decision-making positions, and women and men asking those questions. Why do we have so few women in those decision-making positions?
Claudia, one thing that you shared with me is that you've got this on the foundation side of Schlumberger, this ability, this focus on the fellowships for women in STEM and the work with young women in STEM. So that's very much about helping grow the innovators, whether they're the entrepreneurs or not, the innovators, the scientists, the solution providers who are really going to be solving the issues that we care about solving in the world. And I think that's the other piece of this is when you're backing more women, you're accessing that innovation talent to solve some of our really complex challenges. And so women in the investment decision-making roles really get to tap into that piece as well. So looking at that whole chain.
Exactly.
Ask you, are you divesting or I'm going to ask Tamara this, are you investing in certain industries that have a negative effect on women and girls? Or are you positively thinking about sectors that have a positive effect on women and girls?
So to begin with, we're sector agnostic. But we are looking at those firms that meet the the 2X gender lens criteria. So businesses that have female founders, females in senior leadership, a certain percentage of female employees, or create products and services that cater for women and girls. And this is a wide enough gender lens. So we have a lot of amazing in our pipeline, a lot of amazing men, male founders who are all about hiring more women, increasing women's contribution to the workforce. And this is extremely important. And we feel that we need to encourage those founders. So we are investing in businesses that meet the gender lens, regardless of the industry that they're in. But when we were screening the businesses, we found that there are a lot of women in sectors like education and edutainment, healthcare and well-being, a lot in manufacturing, surprisingly. There's a lot in creative industry. There used to be a lot in tourism before COVID. We hope that we'll see more of them growing their businesses again very soon. And there were a few in tech. So since venture capital firms are targeting tech startups, we try and shy away from that because we know that these women will be served elsewhere. But part of our mandate is to help prep them and make them more investment ready. So we're implementing a lot of technical assistance activities whereby we are trying to create pipeline both for Amam Ventures, but also for the wider ecosystem so that other funds and other financing institutions can tap into that pipeline and help fund more gender-lensed businesses. So we're not shying away from a certain industry, but of course we want those that have potential to empower and seem to be ready to empower more women. We want to put them on the path so that they are hiring more women, they are growing their women into leadership positions and decision-making positions. We're also doing something along that line with our Get On Board program. In the region, the percentage of women on boards is extremely low. And that means that we don't have enough women in decision-making positions asking the right questions and guiding different industries. So we've designed and implemented a program whereby we're creating a pipeline of board-ready women who can become the next board members. We're using them as advisors to support the SMEs that we have in our pipeline and portfolio, but also promoting them for board positions elsewhere. And the one general remark that we're always getting is that where have those women been? We don't know about them yet. They're such amazing women. So we're just happy that we're able to untap them, give them the tools so that they can do more and have a stronger impact.
Thank you. I think one of the things you brought out is something we see at GenderSmart, and GenderSmart is a community of more than 3,500 people and institutions that are investing explicitly with a gender lens around the world, is that yes, there may be sectors which are more prevalent, healthcare, education, agriculture, but there are sectors all the way through to manufacturing, as you mentioned, in energy, in infrastructure, where you find women. And the research that we did at Project Sage, we looked at, which of these sectors do you invest in? And it was across aging. It was across the care economy. It was across fintech and quite a lot of tech, I will say, across those 206 fund managers. They're investing substantially in tech, but clean tech. But within our community, I think there's a group that are looking for the entrepreneurs that already get it about positive impact on women, and those that don't, and where there's a chance to, as you're mentioning, really help them increase their capacity to do better for women as employees, as customers, to pay more attention to what customer needs really look like, and really have positive impact on women in that role as employee or as customer. So how are the impacts of your company's investments measured? I'll stay on you for a minute, and then I'm going to come back to you, Claudia. But what do you do for really thinking about positive impact on women? What are you really looking at?
Sure. So, like I said, we're doing some measurements that are pre-investment, but we are also designing gender lens action plans to make sure that we're monitoring the performance of those companies against the gender lens as we invest. And this is where we're looking at things that support women in the workplace, like pay equity, the percentage of workforce participation, women in leadership, women on boards, benefits, the workplace environment, women in the value chains. And we've designed our impact frameworks around that. We're having our companies measure their performance against those KPIs, and we're reporting those KPIs to our own investors as well. So it's an all integrated impact framework because we're looking at making a dent in the percentage and the gender gap that we have in Jordan and the region. We have a big gap to address. It's sometimes overwhelming, but we feel that we're at least on the right track to make that happen.
And Claudia, what does that look like for you?
So for us is, I talked about the different things that we do. It's a lot about developing women across the board. And we have publicly stated targets on how to, get women at different levels in the organization. So it's more about that and what I mentioned in the investments of a pension. And, we also, we talked about the part of the climate change, which is one of the big drivers at the moment. In the industry, our industry, it's a very important piece of our strategy. We generate revenue in over 120 countries, and our DNA is technology. We were born as a technology company. So having women develop in these areas of technology and science, engineering and science and math and all that is very important. And, we measure that, how we have women in different parts of the value chain. And I mentioned in our communities as well, we have all kinds of metrics. Is it in different parts of the organization, at the board level, executive levels, and so on. So those are the metrics that we use. And then, as I mentioned, for the pension, it's a more detail, depending on the type of investment that we're making.
So some of the things we talked about when we were talking about climate investments specifically, and this is something Gender Smart looks at quite a lot because we have a working group on it, is what did not only jobs look like, but quality jobs. What is a quality job? And I think you both spoke to, pay equity and good benefits and upward mobility and advancement within a company. We talked about where are you really finding, creating wealth and really not only making sure the pay equity is there, but are you really building wealth for a woman business owner, or are you building wealth for the customers and those in the value chain and the supply chain? So when you have a supplier diversity program, one way of looking at it is what does that do for you? But the other way is to say, are you helping those women to grow their businesses and to create wealth? I think people are looking at for financial inclusion. Are not only the women with the strongest businesses and opportunities there financially included, but also where are all women financially included? And are some of the businesses, for example, that you're investing in or that we're investing in really about increasing access to financial services and products? for those women. So many different metrics that you could be using that have to be specific to what women are you talking about and where. What are they doing? Where is their role in the context that you're setting? And then what is the problem you're really out to solve? So you talked about a variety of different SDGs. And in climate specifically, there's 2.2 billion people on the planet that don't have access to reliable, consistent energy, many of whom are women. And so what are we specifically doing to tackle access to reliable, consistent energy for that population, especially when they're using it for productive use assets, or the entrepreneurs and the employers that are creating good employment in that area as well. So both the end customer view and the employee view and the entrepreneur view in that context. What do you think are the opportunities to really think about where women are in the climate value chain and the energy value chain from where you sit, Claudia? And then we'll just wrap up with one more minute.
So I personally believe that, the climate change opportunities, or what we call the energy transition, actually opens many more opportunities for women, because women are bringing new, as I say, diversity of thought to the table. So, I think it's a good opportunity, it's a huge opportunity to help solve these challenges. It's engineering challenges, is many different things that we need to solve in a very quickly. So with that, the way we look at climate change, we like to emphasize that climate change has environmental, economic, and social components. Very important that we keep in mind that is multiple dimensions. And the other thing where it's really well connected, tightly connected with SDG 5, is climate change is not gender neutral. Women still constitute the majority of the world's poor and have less access to human rights. So, one thing that is shocking and is sad is energy poverty disproportionately affects women and girls. So when we take our actions on climate change and we have big pillars, we develop transition technologies to decarbonize oil and gas operations. And at the same time, we invest in new energy, hydrogen, geothermal, and so on. We take climate action in our operations, in our value chain. We need to make sure the transition is just. And what we mean by just is that the energy transition must contribute to all SDGs, SDG 5 being one of them, very important. If you look at the impact that, climate change has, women, as I said, are heavily impacted by this. So it's very important. And, the energy transition brings a lot of opportunities in engineering across the board, technology. We want to make sure women will benefit from those economic opportunities that we have.
So important to be bringing up women are disproportionately affected, and women are at the center of solutions that we really need.
Exactly.
And whether they're high tech or whether tomorrow, the way you mentioned that these could be very low tech and tech-enabled situations. And I think about the 70% of farmers that are in Africa that are women. Some of the providers may be quite high tech, have solutions, but the farmers themselves may be quite low tech in what they're doing. But then access to that information and those resources and those products becomes available when you really pay attention to women as customers. So I'm going to give you each a minute to wrap up. If we really, wanted to give people a sense of what you're most excited about in getting other people to think about where Gender Lens investing and the work that you're both doing can positively impact the lives of women, what would you want to share?
I can start.
Go ahead, Tamara.
What I'm mostly excited about is that we're managing to bring both men and women to the table. And this is where the magic happens. The fact that we're seeing more men believing in what we're doing every day. For me, that's very heartwarming, but also that's important because it says that there's more hope for us in closing that gender gap, whether in finance or in funding or in contribution to the workforce and the economy in general. And when I see those women that we're bringing together in our different programs, talk together and collaborate with each other and promote each other's businesses, that's such an amazing thing to see. It gives you hope that there is a bright future for everyone out there, and there is a bright future for those women business owners. And I'm very proud to be a part of that journey for them.
Yeah. I'm like Tamara. I think I'm very hopeful about the future. I think in the past 2 to 3 years, the world is refocusing on things that matter. And I think it's several things that at the same time are pointing to the importance of having women contributing to these big decisions that we need to address. The business case has been made. I think it's time that we stop, asking to prove that there is value. The numbers are there. The numbers have been there for a while for the companies and for, the different stakeholders that are trying to say, how do I go about applying a gender lens to investment decisions? What I would say is there's really no magic formula. Is it about, as I said at the beginning, is it about asking, how many women are in this team? Is the same way as about any type of diversity. There is no silver bullet. There is no magic formula. There is not one single right way of doing it. It's about doing something. So the only wrong way of doing it is not doing anything. We have seen it. Companies have shown it in boards. Companies have shown it in, women-founded startups that go produce excellent results. We've seen it in decision-making when we have confirmation bias, blind spots when we don't have a diversity. So I think if we all work together and focus on these big challenges that we have to solve for the world, we're going to be in a better place. And I think the momentum is there and we need to build on it.
Well, I want to thank you both, Claudia Jaramillo from Schlumberger and Tamara Abdel-Jabbar from Amam Ventures. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and to UN Global Compact for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.